Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Om Hari Om. Namaste and welcome everyone. This is our monthly live stream Q&A session that we do very specifically and exclusively for the members and serious well-wishers of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Thank you all very much for being here. And this is something that we do about once a month or so. And again, it's something that's exclusive. It is something that is not for the general public. And what this is an opportunity very specifically for all of you who are, again, more serious supporters and members of the ISDS to have an opportunity to ask me questions. And I don't really give a serious talk most of the time. Again, for an hour or so, I just try to leave time so that people can ask me questions and I can give proper and in-depth answers to those questions. So with that, again, thank you all for being here, and let us please dive right into it. And again, if anyone has any questions that you would like to ask me about Vedic spirituality, Sanatana Dharma, etc., please feel free. And I see that we have quite a few people here already, and everyone is saying namaste. Wonderful to see you all. Namaste. And again, there is a little bit of a delay, so I'll wait just a short time and wait for people to ask some questions. Very nice. Let me just read this one thing here first. Namaste, everyone. I'm Luca from Croatia. I recently became a member. It is an honor to be here. Luca, welcome. Welcome. It is absolutely wonderful to have you here. And thank you so much for becoming a member. And let me just tell you, if you're not aware of this, that we actually have a branch of the ISDS in Croatia, in Zagreb. And I have several students there, including an entire family of devotees who are all students of mine. So we actually have a branch in Croatia. When you have a chance, if you haven't done so already, I think you may have, and maybe we didn't have a chance to get back to you, but contact us through the Dharma Central contact form when you have a chance, and we'll try to put you in contact with those individuals who are in Croatia who are also followers of the ISDS. So I will, with that, dive into these questions. Sri Ram asks, why do people in the modern world call depression and anxiety real disorders like neurological disorders? Aren't they just an illusion of the mind? Yes, you are quite correct about that and very intuitive. Indeed, what is interesting is so many, in fact, let me go a little bit in depth into this, so many both positive and negative phenomena that were recognized in the past as having spiritual foundations, spiritual roots, spiritual causes, etc. And again, both good and bad, have unfortunately been secularized today, and to the point where indeed the actual spiritual factors have been taken away from them, and in a way that unfortunately makes understanding such things very, very difficult. Of course, we live in an era in which we worship science. And the truth of the matter is, of course, that science is a good thing when understood. That is, when we understand what is the actual purpose of science. Science is not a philosophy. Science is not a religion. Science is not something we have blind faith in. Science is not an ideology. Science is not a way of understanding the meaning of life. Science is a methodology. That's simple. It's simply a methodology. And unfortunately, today, of course, rather than understanding science as a method, people think that science is a worldview and a philosophy. It is not. It was not designed to be such. But unfortunately, because of this misunderstanding of what true science is, Yes, unfortunately, science will attempt to delve into areas where it has no concern, and that especially includes the internal individual. Now, when it comes to what you were asking about, all of these various disorders, such as depression, etc., and yes, there are so many of these, let's say, emotional and mental ailments that are there. The truth of the matter is, of course, the root cause of so many of these ailments is indeed spiritual. It is indeed spiritual. Now, of course, I can go very in depth into this. I can talk about this at least for an hour, if not for many hours. But let me just say, yes, dealing with depression, for example, the one thing that you pointed out specifically. Why is it that people become depressed? Well, because of spiritual disconnect, because of a spiritual disconnect. And in several senses, people feel spiritually disconnected from themselves, i.e., they are beings who have been programmed to be externalized beings, that is, to live in the external world, seeing the external world as the be all and end all of all perceptual awareness. As a result, they are disconnected from their internal reality. They are disconnected from the being who is there within their own soul. So there's that spiritual disconnect. There is a spiritual disconnect, of course, between ourselves and God. And as I've explained in the past, not really. It's not that we literally are disconnected from God. God is always with us. But there is a disconnection as far as our perception of that connection. That's where the disconnect is. It's actually an illusory disconnection. God is with us, but we forget that. And then finally, we are spiritually disconnected from each other. Human beings today, unfortunately, especially in the last several generations, have found it increasingly difficult to relate to one another. So this is why there has been so much strife and conflict in families, among people, among nations, etc. So again, without going too in depth into this, the foundations of depression and all sorts of other psychological, emotional problems is indeed ultimately spiritual. So let me see if there are any other questions here. All right, here's another question, and this is from Zarni. How does the inherent individuality of Atman develop? How do we experience God's grace every day? Does self-education trump school education, except for a few disciplines? Very nice, very nice. Well, there are several questions here, obviously, 3 separate questions, so I'll try to answer all 3 of these questions in order. First of all, as far as how does the inherent individuality of the Atman develop? Well, the truth of the matter is individuality, and really more accurately, what I would call true personality, spiritual personality, what in Sanskrit is sometimes called svarupa, one's own true form, that is one's own true personality. This is something that is actually inherent within the soul itself, within the Atman itself. Now, initially, of course, while it is inherent, it is there in seed form. It is always there for as long as, now stretching back into time, into the eternality of the past. While it is indeed true that personality and individuality is indeed always there, it does indeed need to develop. We see that even in the world as a whole, we see that personalities have to develop. We see, for example, that when a baby is born, their personality obviously has to go through many, many years and decades of development in order for that full personality to come out, on the one hand. On the other hand, even with a baby who was just born a few hours ago, you can detect personality. You can see that, oh, this baby is expressing himself or herself in a way that's different from the other babies, etc. So in a similar sort of way, and that's just an analogy, but in a similar sort of way, the Atman always has that seed form of personality that is there. As far as how that personality or individuality, as you termed it, how that is developed, again, it takes a very long time. Initially, when the Atman is first merely in existence itself, that is experiencing being aware of actual being itself, when it is in the Brahma Jyoti, the light of God. What it is experiencing is indeed experience itself, that is awareness itself. Now, being that it is a locus of awareness, that it is, in other words, an experiencer, of course, that in itself means that it has personality, that it has individuality, because it is experiencing. It is not experiencing what other Atmans are experiencing, and vice versa. So there we see how, again, individuality is inherent, even when the Atman has simple awareness and not much else to it. But then what indeed begins to happen is those necessary prerequisites to bring out that personality begin to unfold within an individual Atman. And what does that mean? Well, free will, desire in the most general of senses, meaning a yearning for something, etc. And there are several other factors as well. Again, I don't want to go too deeply because this is something easily we can talk about for a long time, and you have 2 more questions that I want to get to. But again, little by little, there's a natural unfolding in such a way that, again, the individuality, the personality of that one specific Atman begins to unfold itself until it comes to the point where, in time, we find a beautiful being who is there, a beautiful Atman. So let me get to your other 2 questions. How do we experience God's grace every day? Wonderful question. By being aware of it. That's the general answer, by being aware of it. You know, it is interesting, I've said this before, how when people think of God's grace, what they tend to think of is they tend to think of a causal succession. In other words, oh, right now I do not have God's grace. I will do something such that, oh, now I do have God's grace. This is the wrong way to think of how God's grace is operative in our lives. Rather, what we need to understand is that we are always, at all times, surrounded by God's grace. God's grace is always there. It's not that, oh, now we don't have it and now we do. No, we have it now. We have God's grace in our lives now. The only distinction is this: we are not aware of it. Thus, we ourselves have, in a way, closed ourselves to that omnipresent grace of God. So again, it's not that we're kind of waiting for God to make up his mind and choose to now give us grace. No, God has bestowed his grace upon us throughout our entire existence. The only difficulty is that, again, we are not aware of that grace. So indeed, this is what we are to do, is to come to the point where we acknowledge that grace. We are thinking of that grace. We become aware of that grace in our day-to-day life with everything that is happening. So with every little thing that is happening, we are grateful. With every little thing that is happening in our lives, good or bad, we think of God. And in this way, we condition ourselves positively in such a way that that blockage is gone, and now we can be consciously aware of God's grace and bathe ourselves in that grace. So finally, I hope that answered that. Does self-education trump school education except for a few disciplines? Yes. Yes. It does indeed, but let me take it one step further. Education from individuals who are apta, who are spiritually reliable, that is, from the guru, from the scriptures, etc., from rishis, from individuals who are indeed self-realized, that trumps even self-education. So self-education, as you stated it correctly, other than a few disciplines where, yes, you do indeed need to have very specific training, self-education does trump, how did you state it, school education, but education from, again, the guru and the scriptures trumps even self-education. If by self-education you mean literally just kind of being in isolation and learning. So I hope that answers that. So let's go on to some more questions. Very good. Here is a question, an interesting question. Sri Acharyaji, does Jesus have a Vedic name we can call him by? Thank you. Indeed, he does. Issa, Issa, Issa is how he is referred to in the Bhavishya Purana, in several other Vedic texts. That is his Vedic name, Issa. So Issa. Very good. That's probably the quickest answer I've ever given to a question, but yes, very simple. That is indeed his Vedic name, his Sanskrit name. All right. How do you teach young men who have temptations to watch porn? Yes, this is something I haven't spoken about really very much at all publicly in any of my videos or anything like that, but it is indeed something that's very important. I have spoken about addictions very, very much. I've spoken about addictions to certainly alcohol and drugs, as well as even video games. But this is another form of addiction that many people have, and specifically young men. You see, unfortunately today especially, of course, we live in an age of screens. And this is why I always tell people, be very, very, very careful with your screen usage. Whether it's being on social media all the time. You know, there are some people who they're just on their phone constantly scrolling on Facebook, making comments, reading comments. Whether it's, again, social media, whether it's video games, which is another addiction, or whether it's something like pornography. Yeah, these are all, unfortunately, let's say, enervating influences. These are influences that just sort of drain us of energy, of our mental energy, etc. And they are all to be avoided as much as possible. In the case of social media really should be used as a tool, not simply as an extension of our ego. We should use social media as a tool in order to educate others and gain a little bit of information when we can. Video games are worthless. They should never be engaged in any way whatsoever. I personally have never played a video game in my entire life, and I think I'm doing okay in my personal life. I don't need video games to teach me anything. And then when it comes to pornography, again, this is another thing where I would say it's not a matter of, oh, well, just try to minimize it. No, there's no need for pornography whatsoever. Pornography should be avoided for a variety of reasons. First of all, because it's a demonic industry, and whenever you are supporting pornography, you are supporting human trafficking. You are supporting the abuse of women, which you don't see. So you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Who are these women? In what conditions are they being kept, etc., etc. And I can guarantee you, in many cases, it's horrific. This is why there is indeed a human trafficking problem in this world. And every time we watch pornography, we're contributing to that. So we need to not watch any pornography whatsoever, especially as spiritual individuals. Now, for those who indeed are addicted to pornography, the very best thing that you can do is indeed to try your best to just go cold turkey and to just stop, to just remove any temptations that are there whatsoever. So what does that mean? I guess just take away anything. So if you have bookmarks to any of these sites, get rid of them. You know, just do your best to never even go to one of these sites for anything whatsoever. So please just do your best to go cold turkey, and rather than being dependent upon these images, instead try to have a true relationship with a woman. And you asked specifically as a young man. As a young man, try to find a young woman. Try to have a relationship in real life. You see, this is the difficulty, is that unfortunately so many young men, the reason why they turn to pornography is because of the fact that they have a very difficult time having a relationship with a real woman in real life. And again, this goes back to many different factors, including the fact that, again, they were raised on screens. So thus, as a result of this, their social skills are not very good. They are lacking in confidence, etc. Do your best to actually find a very good woman, you know, and have a very healthy relationship with that woman, a very respectful relationship with that woman, with the idea of eventually getting married, if this is the right person for you, and having a very healthy family with that person. So I hope that answered the question somewhat. Very good. How did Prahlad become an ardent devotee of Vishnu by birth? Very good. Very good question. Very good question, actually. For those who are not aware of Prahlad, of who Prahlad is, Prahlad it was a very, very important devotee. And very specifically, he was a devotee of Narasingha. But more, he was a devotee of Vishnu, Narasingha being one of the avatars, one of the incarnations of Lord Vishnu. And in his particular case, he had a very interesting story in that, and of course, I'm not going to tell the whole story because for those of you who know it, you know it's an extremely long story, very inspiring, but also very long, so I won't tell the whole story. But his father was Hiranyakashipu, who was actually a demonic being. And despite that fact, despite the fact that his father was indeed an asura, a demonic being, Prahlad himself was indeed born a devotee of Vishnu. So what Sri Ram is asking here is, how was that the case? How did that happen? Well, the backstory is that when right before Prahlad was actually born, when he was within the womb of his mother, there was, of course, a war that was taking place between the asuras, the demonic beings, and the gods. And during the course of this war, the wife of this demonic king, Hiranyakashipu, was captured by the gods. And not knowing what to do with her, they approached Narada, and Narada said, well, give her to me, have her come to my ashram, and I will take care of her, and I will teach her. So what ended up happening was, again, the mother of Prahlad, when Prahlad was still in her womb, was at the ashram of Narada Muni. And she was there for quite some time, for the entire time that Prahlad was growing within her womb. And during that entire time, every single day, Narada would instruct her, would teach her. And keep in mind, this is not just anyone. This was Narada Muni, who is the king of all rishis. So you can imagine that Prahlad's mother, hearing all these instructions from one of the greatest of all gurus, but also eating food that was most likely prepared by him, and just being in his presence. In addition to her being influenced and hearing everything, Prahlad within her womb also was influenced and also was there within his mother's womb, growing physically, but also growing spiritually and hearing the instructions of this great rishi. So by the time he was born, indeed, he was born a pure devotee, a Shuddha Bhakta, a pure devotee of Narayana, of Vishnu. So this is his story. It is as a result of the grace of his guru, who was Narada. And it's an amazing story and amazing to think that, again, Prahlad was not even born. He was not even a baby. He was within his mother's womb. Yet the instruction of the guru, Guru Vani, the instruction of the guru, the voice of the guru, the teachings of the guru are so strong that as an unborn baby, he became transformed and he became a devotee of Vishnu. So that is the story of how that occurred. Very good. Mike Maldonado asks, Namaste Acharyaji, will the coming golden age improve our ability to focus on the name of God? Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed it will. And this is the reason why. We currently, within this very dark, let's say, this very dark era of the Kali Yuga that we are in, we, of course, are surrounded by nothing but distractions. We are surrounded by nothing but confusion, confused voices, a myriad of just different things coming into our senses, some of which are lies, some of which are true, etc., etc. And this being the case, right now, it is indeed extremely difficult to focus on anything spiritual, to focus on the names of God, to focus on spiritual instruction. Indeed, some people are so distracted, their minds are so agitated today that it's difficult for them to even sit down for an hour and read a book. This is why reading books, unfortunately, has declined. Book reading has declined dramatically since the birth of the internet. So most people today, when they want to get information, what do? They watch a video, or they'll read a quick article somewhere on some website. But the idea of having an actual book, a physical book, and sitting down and reading, yeah, people's concentration levels, unfortunately, have reduced to the point where for many people, especially sadly younger people, the ones who need to read books the most, it is now very difficult for people to focus. So the truth of the matter is that with a golden age, i.e. an age in which spirituality is at the center, is at the root of society, and artificiality, artificial environments are reduced as much as possible, and people are now living closer to nature and in more natural conditions, etc., then certainly focus in general will increase for the population. And then when it comes to focusing on the names of God or in meditation, absolutely focus will increase. So yes, that is something that will happen. Meantime, let me just say this. Don't wait. Don't wait for that to happen to try to focus on the names of God anyway. See, this is what's important, is that regardless of the conditions we find ourselves in, whether we're living deep in the countryside in a beautiful, natural, peaceful area, whether we're living in a more urban sort of area, always do your best. Always do your best to focus as much as possible on the names of God. So don't wait for these ideal conditions to happen. Rather, focus on the names of God now as much as you can. Very good. Sri Acharyaji, could you speak a little bit about the Sri Vaishnava Parampara? Thank you very much. Well, to speak a little bit about the Sri Vaishnava Parampara will be very, very difficult because this is the most ancient of all traditions within Vedic spirituality that goes back quite literally to the beginning of time and beyond the beginning of time, actually. But I can talk a little bit about this, certainly. Let me begin with this. First of all, within the Vaishnava Marga, what is called the Vaishnava Marga, that is the path of Vaishnavism, that is the devotees of Vishnu. Vaishnava means a devotee of Vishnu. So there's the Vaishnava tradition, which is synonymous with the Vedic or the Sanatana Dharma tradition. But within the Vaishnava, let's say, tradition, there are 4 recognized sampradayas, 4 recognized lineages. And again, just due to time, I'm not going to go through all of them. You can feel free to look them up. But one of these lineages is what is called the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. It's actually called Sampradaya, not so much Parampara. That has a different meaning, Parampara. But as far as the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, the inspiration of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, and that being who is considered to be, let's say, the ontological source of our very Sampradaya itself is Sri Lakshmi. This is why it's called the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. It's named after Sri Lakshmi. And Lakshmi herself, of course, being not just anyone. See, it's unfortunate that in everyone's absolute confusion about what today is called Hinduism, and who is this god and that goddess, and who is this person and that person, and what is the meaning of it all, this seeming polytheism, but at the same time monotheism. People are very confused about much of the gods and goddesses and what this all represents. Sri Lakshmi is not merely a goddess. She certainly is a goddess too, in the same way that you could say God is a god, certainly, but he's not merely a god. In the same way, Sri Lakshmi is actually considered to be Ishvari, according to the Rig Veda. Ishvari. She is the co-absolute. In other words, when we think of God, when we think of the highest, the absolute, Brahman, in personalized form, this is known as Shriman Narayana, that is Lakshmi Narayana. Thus, when we think of Lakshmi Devi, we are talking about the feminine aspect, quite literally, of God. So thus, Sri Lakshmi is the source of our very Sampradaya, the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. So again, this is why when I say that this is not just the oldest lineage on earth, but it goes back beyond even time. This is what I mean. Its origin is purely spiritual and is God in feminine form as Sri Lakshmi. So all that being said, again, it's kind of the question itself I cannot do full justice to, because I would have to give probably a 5-hour lecture to talk about the full significance of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, but just a few things. First of all, yes, this is the oldest of all the sampradayas, of all the lineages. It is the most orthodox of them, thus it's recognized by all the other Vaishnava sampradayas, including Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that is, followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All Vaishnavas recognize the Sri Vaishnava as the king, the king of all sampradayas, because they are the most orthodox. Within the history of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, there have been some of the most amazing personages imaginable, some of the most amazing acharyas, some of the most amazing yogis, some of the most amazing bhaktas in history. Some of these, and again, I'm not going to do justice to everyone because there are thousands of them, but I'll just mention a few. The most ancient layer historically are what are called the 12 Alvars. These were 12 individuals who lived many thousands of years ago. They lived starting very soon after the beginning of the Kali Yuga, so starting roughly a little bit over 2000 BC. These 12 individuals were all great devotees. Some of them were philosophers. One of them was a woman, Andal was her name, etc. But these were all individuals who were recognized as being great saints, great sages, great acharyas. In addition, Sri Nata Muni is another very important individual. And in fact, if you look behind me to what is my right, you'll see an actual image of Sri Nata Muni. And he is, I'll position this a little bit better, he is situated, he's sitting down, he has his hand up in the Abhaya Mudra, and he is right next to Narada Muni, if you recognize Narada. That is Sri Nata Muni. He is another individual in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya who was an author, who was a very great yogi. After him was Yamuna Acharya, who was another great person. But then of all the acharyas, the most famous of them was indeed Ramanuja Acharya. He wrote the Sri Bhashya, he wrote a commentary on the Vedanta Sutras and many, many other works as well, etc. So the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya is the primary Sampradaya that I teach, that I follow. So anyone who is out there, and if you consider yourself to be one of my students, well, this is what we are following. It is indeed the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. That is our Sampradaya. The primary mantra that Ramanuja and all of these people, actually, who I mentioned, and many other acharyas who there's just not enough time to mention them, the primary mantra that they all taught was Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. This is the primary mantra that all of these great Sri Vaishnava acharyas taught. It is the mantra that I have been practicing since roughly the age of 14. And it is the primary mantra of the International Sanatana Dharma Society that all of our sincere students meditate upon. So, very small nutshell of what is the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. I hope that was helpful. Very good. Namaste, Acharyaji. I am wondering if you would be able to touch further upon the ISDS as being organized in Canada. Certainly, yes. We have several individuals, approximately 10 to my knowledge, who are very serious individuals. Very, very serious indeed. Several of them want to take initiation from me, and one, in fact, will be doing so here in Omaha in approximately 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. But we have about 10 people who are extremely serious individuals. And in fact, let me back up and let me explain this a little bit. How the ISDS organizes itself on an international scale. And that is this. This is how we have decided to do this because it's most logical, it makes the most sense for reasons that, again, not enough time to go into. We are in the process of starting national branches. Now, most organizations will start very local individual units, local branches in a city. Oh, the New York branch and the this branch, the that branch, talking about specific, very localized places. With the ISDS, we've decided to take a very different approach, and that is we are beginning with national branches first. So thus we have national branches in Australia, we have a branch in the UK, we have a branch in Croatia. We are in the midst of starting a branch in Canada. Indeed, unfortunately, the demands on my time are beyond comprehension, and the only reason why we haven't officially started a branch in Canada and many other places already is, again, just due to lack of time on my part, because I like to be very personally involved in at least the initial founding of these national branches. But as far as our branch in Canada, it is unofficial right now. As soon as I have time, I will be having an online meeting with, again, all of these individuals who are very serious, who are there. I have one individual who I'm going to be naming as the person heading up our national branch in Canada, and we will indeed have a branch. And let me just say this, if you're in Canada and you want to be involved, contact us. Please go to dharmacentral.com, use the contact form, and write us a message and be very specific. Explain that you are the person who asked this question, and we will do our best to get you involved when we start the national branch in Canada. Very good. Yes. Very good. Sarah asks, Namaste Acharyaji, could you speak about the asana aspect of sadhana, about sequences we are meant to practice? Absolutely. Yes, definitely. In fact, interestingly, this is an aspect of the International Sanatana Dharma Society and of what I do in my teaching that has not been publicized very much. And that is that, and again, before I answer directly, let me first back up and say this. One of many, let's say, goals that the International Sanatana Dharma Society has, and we have many goals, but one of them is this, and that is to absolutely revive the full and complete Vedic system. And what this means is literally everything. With many, let's say, Vedic movements or organizations, they will stress one thing over another. Some people will stress yoga almost exclusively. Some people, bhakti. Some individuals will stress Vedanta, and then other aspects as well. With us, we are attempting to revive it all and revive it perfectly and purely and authentically. Well, one of those things is indeed yoga, the yoga system. And again, this is not something that we have publicized very much, but indeed, I have taught individuals the full yoga system, specifically as found in the Upanishads. Many people are not aware of the fact that really the primary texts of the yoga system are the Upanishads, including Bhagavad Gita, which is considered to be an Upanishad. But with all that as background, indeed, the ISDS, we have our own yoga. That is, we have our own vinyasa, our own sequence of asanas that we teach. And again, I have to keep repeating this just due to lack of time. I can't go deeply into the origins of this and exactly what it looks like, etc. But let me just say that this is indeed one of the projects that the ISDS has for the immediate future, is indeed to share our yoga system with the world. There are individuals who have learned this from me directly. Indeed, I actually taught our vinyasa system to several audiences, the last time being, I believe, in 2015 in Austin, Texas, where I taught it to an audience of maybe 30 or 40 people, half of whom were yoga teachers, very established yoga teachers, and they were amazed by the system, the vinyasa sequence that I was teaching them. But again, please be patient with us, and in time, we will have a video. showing this asana sequence to the world. Just give us a little bit of time, please. We're trying to do a lot, and we only have limited number of volunteers, but it will come out, I assure you, in time. But thank you for asking. I'm sorry, let me say one more quick thing, because I didn't really address the first part of your question, and that is addressing the asana aspect of sadhana. Asana is indeed an important aspect of sadhana. You see, what it means to be a practitioner of Sanatana Dharma. Again, not someone who just says, oh yes, this is my religion. But no, to be an individual who is a practitioner, who is very seriously trying to make spiritual progress in the path of Sanatana Dharma. What you are called is a yogi. What we are called are yogis. What I am is a yogi. I have been a yogi arguably at least since 12 years old. Indeed, my first asana teachers, and if you're a yogi, I'm sure maybe you've heard of these people, Dharma Mitra and Swami Bua, were the two individuals I began learning asana from at the age of 12. But we are indeed yogis, and that being the case, what this means is, yes, we practice the full system, and that includes asana. Asana, especially the way we teach it, which again will come out in time in the form of a video at the very least, we do asana even as a meditation. That is in vinyasa, in a sequential flow going from one asana to another. We harmonize the physical flow with breath, with intention, with bhakti, with the idea of making the entire flow of one asana into another, into a meditative experience. And this is how indeed asana is meant to be done. It's meant to be fully meditative. So thus you do meditation beforehand as actual sit-down meditation, as I've taught in the past. Then you do asana as, again, a meditational experience. And then finally shavasana, which also is meant to be meditation when done properly. So yes, I hope that answers the question as far as that. All right, several questions here from Siddharth. Are Pleiadians part of the heavenly planets? Also, how do we know if Gita is unadulterated? If you can also talk about the evil cabal, that would be great, especially regarding vaccinations, etc. All right, so there are at least 3 questions here. First of all, let me just say, as far as Pleiadians being part of the heavenly planets, I know nothing about Pleiadians. I've heard of the Pleiades, but otherwise I know nothing about astronomy, unfortunately. Science is not my forte. I mean, I probably know more about science than the typical individual, but again, I'm a guru, not a scientist, so I can't really answer that question. As far as how do we know if the Gita is unadulterated, well, there's no evidence to the contrary. There's absolutely no evidence to the contrary. One thing that is truly amazing and wonderful about the Vedic tradition is indeed the very fact that throughout our tradition, for many thousands of years, we have had methodologies for ensuring that the teachings are in a very pure way carried down from generation to generation to generation. Indeed, not only, unfortunately, in the 20th and 21st century, not only are these methods not so much followed anymore, because they don't really need to be, because we have printing now, but a lot of people aren't even aware of these methods. But yes, these scriptures were memorized, and because they were understood to be sacred, people didn't tamper with them. This is a very faulty idea that unfortunately comes from academia, that comes from materialistic scholars who just believe that spiritual people are just as corrupt and greedy and evil and self-serving as anyone else, and that the evidence is the opposite of that. If you're a truly spiritual individual and you have your sacred text in front of you and you have it memorized, you're not going to alter it for any purpose whatsoever. So yes, again, without going too deeply, there are methods by which these Vedic scriptures were memorized. In fact, just for fun, maybe I'll mention one of these that people know nothing about. It's interesting. So for example, individuals who traditionally have memorized the the four Vedas, for example, Rig Veda. And yeah, again, for individuals who don't know this, before the scriptures were literally written down, they were memorized. And this is how they were carried forward generation after generation, is that a person would memorize them and then help another person to memorize them. But again, this was done in so systematic a methodology that the memorization was perfect and nothing was altered. So just as one example, the Rig Veda, and in fact really all the Vedas, but I'm using the Rig Veda as an example because it's a very big book. What would occur is that a group of Brahmana children would be taught for many, many years to memorize this scripture perfectly. And I mean every syllable, every sound, the intonation, everything, to the point where one of the methods of memorization was that at a certain stage, after many years of memorizing and learning other methods of memorization, it would get to the point where the guru would tell, at this point, the teenage child, all right, now you are going to memorize how to recite this entire Veda from memory, orally, backwards. And this was a method that was used to ensure that they knew the scriptures perfectly and unaltered. So this is why, again, people just don't know this. People don't understand the pains to which generations of brahmanas went to make sure that nothing was ever altered as far as any of our scriptures, Bhagavad Gita or otherwise. All right, very good. And then, can I talk a little bit more about the evil cabal? Well, again, it's one of those questions where, yes, I can. I can talk about it probably for about 5 or 6 or 10 hours, or maybe more, actually, probably for days. But what is to be said? Yes, indeed. Many individuals have known this. Many people have spoken about this. Many people have known this intuitively. Even, let's say, just to pick an accurate year, but just a representational year, 20 years ago, even, if some individuals spoke about the idea that, oh yes, there might be a small group of extremely powerful, extremely wealthy individuals who are extremely evil, who really control not everything, but much of what goes on in the planet, in the general trajectory of how things are going economically, politically, culturally, socially, even indeed spiritually, etc. But this small elite group of individuals who maybe we would call a cabal, these people are evil and they have evil intent, etc. If you said this 20 years ago even, you would indeed maybe be considered to be a conspiracy theorist or something like that. Not today. Today, the number of individuals who recognize this fact has increased, without exaggeration, 100-fold. 100-fold. And again, I know because I have been aware of this all of my life. Indeed, all of my life I've been aware of this, of the fact that there is indeed an actual cabal of individuals who take advantage, let's say, of their own wealth and power and have been steering the planet in a very demonic sort of way. I've been aware of this all of my life. And I have also been aware all of my life of how the public perceives this idea. And again, let me tell you, 100 times more people on the planet now accept this today compared to even 20 years ago. People are waking up. People realize that this is not conspiracy theory. It's not some weird idea. Yes, there has been a hidden hand of evil individuals who have been controlling us. As far as vaccines, I don't want to go too deeply into that. A, because it's a somewhat controversial topic, and B, because I'm not an MD. I am a doctor, I have a PhD, but I'm not an MD. But let me just say, generally speaking, I personally stay away from vaccines. I advise my students to stay away from vaccines. Indeed, I have written letters as a spiritual leader for several of my students who have requested it of me, exempting their children from having to take vaccines, etc. So generally speaking, yes, I recommend that you stay away from them. Let me put it this way. For myself personally, and I'm guesstimating here, the last time that I had a flu was maybe 25 years ago, which was the last time I took a flu vaccine. So in other words, I have not had a flu vaccine in 25 years. And the last time I had a flu was about 25 years ago. So, just my own experience with that. So let's go on a little bit, and we have a little bit more time. It's 7:51 my time, so we have a little bit more time. Very good. So, comment here, science is nothing but a mini window of observation into the vast cosmos. Yes and no. I mean, you are in spirit, what you're saying is correct. However, we have to be very accurate and philosophical about this. It is not even so much that it is a mini window into, as you said it, into the vast cosmos. It is an extremely limited window in that it doesn't even look at the vast cosmos itself, but one aspect of the cosmos. And then there are other vast aspects of the cosmos that science cannot peer into in any way whatsoever. So in other words, as far as the cosmos, science has the ability to, let's say, give us insight into empirical reality and empirical reality alone. That is what we can know through the senses. That is the sole domain of science. Science does not involve this, and this surprises, sadly, some even scientists today. It wouldn't have 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Scientists were more intelligent in the past, and they understood this. Science deals exclusively with the empirical. It does not actually deal with the intellect. It does not deal with, interestingly, even mathematics. Mathematics is a tool that we can use in order to, let's say, further the extent of science. And more, science certainly does not deal with anything philosophical or spiritual. Rather, the actual domain of science is purely the empirical and nothing beyond the empirical. This is why when individuals try to use science in order to understand the philosophical, which again is the intellectual, or what to speak of the spiritual, they are attempting artificially to take the methodology of science and extend it into areas where it does not have the ability to penetrate those areas. So that's the idea of science. It deals exclusively with the empirical. Very good. We describe Krishna as being of goodness, beauty, and power when saying that we should worship him. But nobody has to say goodness, beauty, and power are Krishna to get people to appreciate them. I'm not sure if I 100% understand the question, but I think I do, or more of a statement than a question. Let me say this, that these three things you mentioned, goodness, beauty, and power, these are attributes of Krishna. These are attributes of God. God is the source of these things, but not vice versa. And if that's what you're saying, then that is quite true. So in other words, and this is something that, again, in my talks I have attempted to explain to people. Some people have the philosophical acumen to actually understand it. Some don't, sadly. But there is a radical distinction, for example, between saying that Krishna is beauty versus beauty is Krishna. Or let me state this more objectively. God is beauty versus beauty is God. The two are not the same. They are radically distinct statements. And again, for someone who's not very philosophical, not very intelligent, they would just hear these two terms and say, well, no, what's the difference? It's the same thing. Vastly different. It's kind of like saying Acharyaji has hair versus hair has an Acharyaji. You see the distinction now. One is subject, one is attribute. So in the same way, to say that God is beauty, that God is wisdom, etc., that's correct in saying that God is the source of these things, that God is subject, and these secondary features are indeed attributive to God. They are attributes of God. But to say it the other way around, which some people do, some people say truth is God. No, it's not. No, it is not. God is truth. Truth is a feature of God. It's an attribute of God. You cannot take the attribute and make the attribute the subject. Even in day-to-day life, we would not do that, even in language, even in understanding, even intellectually, logically, we know that doesn't make sense. So I hope that answers that. Om Namo Narayanaya. Very, very good name for, I guess that's your YouTube channel. And thank you, Acharyaji. I'm also from Zagreb. It's so beautiful to hear. Yes, definitely. Please, again, contact us. If you go to dharmacentral.com, you'll see a contact form. And just let us know who you are. Give us your contact information. Very important, your contact information especially. And we will put you in touch with our devotees in Zagreb. And we have actually devotees in other places in Croatia as well. But that's where they're, let's say, centralized. What is the Vajravarna? All right, this will have to be the last question because we only have 3 minutes. And as always, I truly apologize for all the questions that I could not get to. I know we have many, many more. I haven't even seen many of them yet. I haven't had a chance, so I apologize. But again, just due to time, we're going to end with this last question. What is the Vajravarna? Well, let me answer that. This is something that, sadly, like with many aspects of Sanatana Dharma that I have revealed to the modern world, at least, let's say, certainly not to the world, but to modernity, like so many different aspects of Vedic culture that have been forgotten, that are right there in front of us, right there in the scriptures, but yet so many people have forgotten so many of these things and just kind of focus on the generalities of what Vedic philosophy and spirituality is. This is also something that indeed is purely Vedic, that is an interesting and important concept that almost nobody knows about and that I've reintroduced into the world. And that is this. First, we understand that there is what is called the Varna system, Varna. And that is what some people, to my irritation, call the caste system, because caste is castus. Caste is a Portuguese word which very poorly approximates what is meant by Varna. But in the Varna system, and that is these 4 psychophysical natures that are then, let's say, grouped into classes, and that is the Brahmanas, priestly class, Kshatriyas, warriors, administrators, Vaishyas, and that is, let's say, producers, individuals who are merchants, who are farmers, and then Shudras, individuals who are laborers, who work with their hands, who do not work intellectually, but who work with their hands. These are what are called the 4 Varnas, and these are recognized universally throughout Vedic civilization, but also in many other ancient civilizations as well, interestingly. Well, these are what is known as Chaturvarna, that is the 4 Varnas. But interestingly, unbeknownst to most individuals, I was at first going to say many, but no, actually very few people know this, there is indeed a 5th Varna, and that is what is called the Vajravarna. And what the Vajravarna is, first of all, let me explain. The reason why it's rarely spoken about is because of the fact that members of the Vajravarna are extremely rare. They're very rare. Even though we have many instances of them throughout history, it is extremely rare to find such individuals. And what the Vajravarna is, first of all, Vajra means thunderbolt. It can sometimes mean diamond as well. But this is the Thunderbolt Varna. And what this is the class of individuals who, and it goes much deeper than this, but again, I'm giving a very small synopsis. These are individuals who, let's say, fully harmonize within their Swadharma, which within their inner nature, the very best qualities of the Kshatriya and the Brahmana. That is, they are individuals who they are individuals who are worthy of being called spiritual masters. These are individuals who themselves, many of these individuals have been rishis, many have been gurus. These are individuals who are as spiritual, as yogic, as individuals can be. These are individuals who have that yogic discipline such that they have acquired or are at least on the process, on the way to acquiring self-realization and God realization on the one hand. On the other hand, they also have within their being, in complete harmony with that aspect, the fact that they are warriors, the fact that they can be extremely martial individuals. They know how to use weaponry. They are individuals who can lead armies, who can lead military campaigns, and more importantly, who can serve as rulers, as kings and queens in some cases. These are individuals who can rule a nation administratively as a perfect ruler. Another name for such individuals in the Vajravarna, they are sometimes called Chakravartins. They are sometimes called Rajarshis. Raja, Rishi, two words placed together. Raja, king, Rishi, sage. So these are philosopher kings, to use the term that Plato used. So these are individuals who, again, and it really goes much deeper than this, but again, we're already a little bit over time. Let's just say they harmonize within their being this perfect combination of both Brahmana and Kshatriya. They are a warrior priest, let's say. They can be a guru on the one hand, but then when necessary, they'll grab their sword and they'll lead an army into battle. That's the highest Varna. This is considered to be higher than the Kshatriyas, higher than even the Brahmanas. And again, it's the most rare of individual. And needless to say, what we need today is a veritable, even if small, of necessity, still, we need a veritable legion of such Vajravarna individuals to lead us into the golden age and out of the darkness. So I hope that answers that question. Again, my very sincere apologies. We're going to have to stop there just due to time. Thank you all again for being here. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. I know so many of you who are listening to this live, but then many others of you will be seeing this in the recording that will be on YouTube. For those of you who are watching this, I thank you very deeply for your ongoing support of my work and of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Again, the public is only aware, and this is by design. This is to ensure that what we are going to do and what we are doing will actually be 100% successful. The public is only aware of maybe 10% of what we do. Much of what we do to help to bring about this golden age is behind the scenes. Much of it, little by little, will be revealed to the public. But let me just say that this movement is not like any other movement on earth. Not merely due to its purity, not merely due to its authenticity, not merely due to many other factors, but due to the fact that this movement is indeed geared toward one primary goal, and that is indeed eradicating the darkness that has been here in the Kali Yuga and helping to establish a truly golden age of light and of Dharma in which the entire world will benefit from Vedic culture in every way, spiritually and materially. Spiritually and materially. So thank you for your ongoing support. We need your help in every way. We need you to help us as volunteers. As I said earlier, we don't have enough volunteers for the growth that we're experiencing now. We need your donations. We need your donations. We need as much help as possible to save the world, to change the world in so fundamental a way as we are geared toward doing. It's not easy. It cannot be done alone. It can't be done by me alone. That's something I'm supremely aware of. I need your help, and I thank you for your help. And with that, as far as our next, let's say, private Q&A for our members, we will do this again sometime next month. Otherwise, we have our public live streams every week. We'll be having another one tomorrow, that is Monday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So please look for that. Just go to our channel on YouTube and you'll see that that's there. If you can join us again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central Time, then there will be a public live stream in which I will be giving a talk and then trying to take some more questions. With that, I thank you And Namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Victory to Sanatana Dharma. And with that, everyone, please take very good care of yourselves until next time that we meet.